All initial opinions are this is genuine. What you're about to see may disturb you.
We have been fighting the enemy for weeks. They began to break through all our defenses. The fear in my brother's eyes carries me through from hour to hour. We must stay true to our one belief, a belief that we can crush the evil plague sweeping across our land.
The galaxy is a vast and uncharted territory, leaving many to believe that humankind is not alone. Out there, somewhere in the stars and distant planets, there must be something, or maybe someone, waiting, searching for answers just like us. Aliens, or extraterrestrials, have become one of the most fascinating topics of all time, with many believing that with how large the galaxy is, we simply cannot be the only ones here. Over time, there have been many sightings, footage, testimonies, UFOs, and even abductions. Now, of course, it's debatable whether or not any of them are real or fake. But in the case of Sergeant Nathan Hale, it was his reality. Resistance is yet another Sony exclusive IP that has not seen the light of day for well over a decade now. This game, like many others in this YouTube series, was a classic and fan favorite at the time. I'm sure many of you watching this video will be having an influx of nostalgia as you watch this. In this video, we're going to go over a brief history of the game's developer, discuss the plot and gameplay of the games, cover any multiplayer they may have, critic and gamer consensus of the games, the sales numbers of each game, and some developer interviews and comments if they're relevant. Of course, this will all culminate in the reviewing of the final game and what caused the franchise to go on hiatus. The majority of the information covered in this video will come from the video game wikis, developer interviews, gaming articles, blog posts, and even forums when it comes to finding out how the individual gamer feels about this series. As always, I'll do my best to link any sources down below in the comments. If for whatever reason I can't link it all down there, I'll have a link to a document with all the sources for you guys to explore. Additionally, I will cover the spin-off games. Unlike my recent Killzone video where I brushed past the non-mainline games, I received some comments on that video stating they wish I would have talked about them. So with that feedback, from now on I will always cover any spin-off games related to a franchise in this series. Now let's figure out what happened to a new era of gaming is approaching, and with it comes console exclusives. And on November 17th of 2006, the PlayStation 3 would be released in North America for retail sale, and with it, a launch title, exclusive for the PlayStation. Originally titled I-8 by Insomniac, as it was their 8th game being developed, this title would help establish Insomniac Games as a key developer for Sony. Now if you're thinking to yourself, that developer sounds familiar, it's because they are. Many of you may know them today as the developers of the recent Spider-Man games. Prior to Resistance, Insomniac worked on games like Disruptor, Ratchet & Clank, and Spyro. Disruptor was Insomniac's first introduction into the FPS genre. While the game may have been a success from the reviews of critics, it was a commercial failure, selling well below the company's expectations. Part of the reason for this is because Disruptor was being released during a time frame where any FPS that wasn't Doom or Quake was being considered a Doom clone. Although it did have a unique mechanic with psychic powers and being a 3D game, it simply didn't garner enough of a following from gamers to achieve much financial success. This would cause Insomniac Games to swing the development pendulum in the opposite direction towards more kid-friendly and 3D platforming type of games with Spyro and Ratchet & Clank. The original PlayStation would be home to the Spyro franchise, while the PlayStation 2 would house their other classic, Ratchet & Clank. Now at the time, these were their only two active IPs, and seeing as how they had left the FPS genre behind, no one would have really expected them to go back. But as mentioned earlier, Insomniac swings the pendulum, and to the gamer's shock, they would be the developers behind the bombastic launch title, Initially, Resistance was planned as a futuristic marine soldier shooter in a similar vein like Halo, but also taking inspiration from media like Starship Troopers, via a video from Insomniac Full Moon Show.
someone who could draw something for a realistic first-person shooter. And there were implications on the test that was implying a Starship Troopers kind of thing. And I was thinking to myself, oh man, that's totally what I want to do, man. I'm so geared up for this.
At the time, Sony didn't really have like a premier, like, gangbusters FPS hit. So we were thinking, we were just like, we had lunch and we were like, what if, could that be us?
And we were starting to brainstorm. We get together and we brainstorm frequently about what the story could be, what the kind of the gist of the game was. I think very early on we decided, though, it was clearly about aliens. In the original story, it was all about time travel.
Right, I was going to say it was kind of a big space opera, more of like a science fiction, outer space opera kind of thing, right?
Yeah. And there was this other game called Halo or something that seemed kind of similar at the time.
That one was more of a romantic comedy, so I think we had a distinction.
And that one scene from Starship Troopers was kind of what inspired us from the beginning.
With that one scene where like 1,000 enemies are coming over the sand dunes, and you're like, whoa, like what if you could do that in FPS? So that was, that's not a world or a hook or anything, but that was kind of like our idea of what if we could somehow kind of get that kind of quantity, that kind of there's that kind of spectacle into an FPS.
The developers didn't want to take this into space though, as they felt the need to make the game more grounded, allowing players to grasp the story more easily. Originally, the game was being proposed to take place in World War I, but the developers felt like it would be a harder selling point for the game. And in their words, the weapons weren't as cool. This led to them settling on the World War II setting with a wider array of weapons and machinery to work with. Early concept design for the Chimera was a lizard-looking race, but this concept drove one of the developers mad, leading them to redesign the enemy into the one we can all recognize today. With the game being set to release as a launch title, exclusive time was cut short like many console exclusives. This is also something we saw with Killzone Shadowfall. When making a launch exclusive, you are heavily limited in the time frame department of development, making it more frequent that corners need to be cut and things must be rushed without a deeper level of polish. The marketing for this game featured two websites. The first was an interactive map that contained historical events of the Resistance universe prior to the Chimeran War. The second website was a diary that contained info about the characters of the Fall of Man and more info about the historical events. The official website for Resistance Fall of Man contained a series of videos narrated by Anne Greenwood. A total of 10 videos were released on the website.
It began with the birds, thousands of them, blackening out the sky. It is like the world is gathering itself, battening down the hatches for some storm that we cannot yet see. Since I was born, Russia has lain hidden behind the great wall that marks her border, guarding her like the world's best kept secret. Now the wall is down, and the secret is out.
And during Resistance Fall of Man's marketing campaign, in addition to trailers, videos, viral websites, and blogs, 2 marketing posters were released with the noteworthy phrase, "Human history just got a little less human." Resistance Fall of Man, the first game in the series, and released in 2006, is set in an alternate history of 1951, and follows Sergeant Nathan Hale as he and the human resistance forces attempt to drive a mysterious alien-like invasion out of the United Kingdom. Resistance had positive critical reception, garnering particular praise in view of its status as a launch title, and winning several awards. As of 2007, the game sold more than 2.1 million copies. But before we dive into any more details, let's go over the plot and story of the game a little bit further to really understand what we're working with. In the 1900s, an insect-like alien race known as the Chimera arrive in Russia. Using advanced technology, they infect hundreds of civilians and subject them to artificial evolution, creating a diverse army of creatures ranging from simple foot soldiers to spider-like giants. By 1949, all of Europe has fallen to the Chimera. 12 months later, a vast invasion force tunnels under the English Channel, conquering much of England and leaving only scattered pockets of human resistance. In 1951, the United States, despite taking a position of neutrality in the conflict, finally elects to deploy a task force to assist the UK as part of Operation Deliverance. Among the soldiers is Army Ranger Sergeant Nathan Hale. However, soon after landing in York, he and his squad are ambushed by enemy troops, who infect them with the Chimera virus. Hale, the only survivor, discovers that he has an innate resistance to full infection. Instead, he gains increased strength and faster reflexes, the ability to instantly heal light injuries, and gold-colored irises, a common trait of the Chimera. This also gives us the first big question of the franchise: why was Hale able to survive this? Which is something that will be explored and explained more as the series continues. Hale, along with many others, are captured and taken to a Chimeran conversion center to be turned into Chimera. During his escape, Hale meets Captain Rachel Parker, who is also narrating the story of the game to us. Once the pair escape, they make their way to the Resistance headquarters, where Hale finds a secret weapon, a chimera known as an angel. The angels are the highest forms of Chimeran life. They control the other chimera, and Hale is forced to kill this one. After this, Hale continues to fight the Chimera, with Parker assisting over comms, and alongside Lieutenant Stephen Cartwright, a British Royal Marines commando. Eventually, they begin to investigate the massive Chimeran towers that dot the British countryside, and come to the shocking conclusion that the Chimera are not building the towers, but excavating them. Hale finds that the towers are all connected to a massive central tower in London, which is covered in snow and ice despite it being July, another puzzle the game raises. Hale convinces Parker to have the British and US forces attack London and destroy this tower, which he believes is the key to defeating the Chimera. After a long and grueling battle, the tower is destroyed. This causes a chain reaction, destroying the other towers across the island and killing the angels inside, leading to the deaths of all the Chimera in Britain. However, they still have a firm grip on Europe and are spreading throughout the world. Hale is presumed dead, having not been able to escape the tower, but a post-credit scene shows him being collected by an unknown Black Ops group in a VTOL aircraft, setting up a sequel. As a final note here, the story mode was also playable in co-op. Like many shooters of this era, Resistance takes many inspirations and gameplay mechanics from titles like Doom and Quake. For one, the player is able to hold all weapons at the same time while using a weapon wheel to switch between them. Movement does not affect the accuracy of your weapons either, and on top of this, no matter what direction you're going, your movement doesn't get slowed down, making old school shooter tactics like circle strafing and bunny hopping viable. The health system is a hybrid one, taking inspiration from the popular regenerating health mechanic of Call of Duty 2 and old school fixed health systems. The health bar is divided into 4 segments, each of which regenerate over time if they are partially depleted, but require the game's version of a health pack called Simback to be picked up if any of them are fully depleted. This meant that if you were good enough to not take any damage, you wouldn't have to pick up the health packs, and could theoretically go the entire game only regenerating health. The enemies in this game are also similar to that of old school shooters, or they are more of bullet sponges than being able to just be mowed down carelessly. With even the most common enemy type, the hybrid, it's able to withstand multiple headshots from basic weaponry. Of course, this being a more modern shooter, the game also had a melee mechanic utilizing the motion sensing feature of the 6-axis controller. It was also used for a number of other features, like shaking off enemies that grab onto the player, shaking off tags and flames in multiplayer, and quickly bringing up a map or leaderboard in a multiplayer match. The player also has access to turrets and a drivable jeep with a gun turret on certain levels. The game was also on Sony's list of titles to receive an online update to support the vibration feature of the DualShock 3 controller for Japan, North America, and Europe. There is also a skill point system in the game similar to Ratchet & Clank. These are awarded for certain actions that are hinted at by their titles. However, the specific details are not revealed until the skill point is actually earned. For example, one skill point called Tag You're It requires killing 5 enemies in 30 seconds with the bullseye weapon. Finally, there are multiple intel documents scattered throughout each level. These give the player extra insight into what has happened, is happening, and will happen throughout the game. Now let's cover the weapons. As mentioned earlier, you're able to carry every weapon you acquire throughout the game at all times. These weapons are based on real weapons from the 1950s, while some weapons are futuristically altered in accordance with the game's alternate historical setting. For the standard rifle of the game, the M5A2 Folsom Carbine is a fully automatic rifle with an underslug grenade launcher attachment. This is also the starting weapon of the game. The mirror weapon to this for the Chimera, the bullseye, while having a higher rate of fire than that of the M5A2, it is also less accurate, but this is made up for by the weapon's secondary fire mode, which can tag enemies. This tag acts as a tracking beacon, allowing the weapon's projectiles to not miss, unless the tagged enemy is obstructed in any way. Next is the Rossmore 236 combat shotgun. Used for close quarter engagements, this weapon is capable of 2 firing modes, the primary fire mode being single shot and the alternate mode allowing the shotgun to fire off 2 shells at once. The auger rifle fires salvos of transient radiation that will tunnel through solid matter. The salvos increase in power with each object they pass through. Hard surfaces are unaffected, but organic tissue will sustain severe burns. While the auger has a relatively small ammunition capacity, the fact that it ignores cover means every shot is potentially lethal. It can also deploy a force barrier. This alters the Augur's energy salvo to create a barrier that is impervious to all weapon fire except that from the Augur. Enemies will suffer injuries if they move through the barrier. The L-23 Far Eye, a semi-auto sniper rifle for the humans, chambers 303 rounds and has a special ability with its secondary fire mode to slow down time for a more accurate shot. In multiplayer, this is replaced with the ability to zoom in. The XR-005 Hailstorm can fire subsonic bolts that ricochet off surfaces. The bolts will continue to travel until they find a soft target or exhausted. The alternate fire will discharge the entire clip and fire the bolts like a turret. This weapon is not available in multiplayer. The XR-003 Sapper, capable of producing sticky mines with its primary fire, these mines are able to stick to most surfaces, and the secondary fire of this weapon will detonate whichever sticky mine the gun is pointed at. The L-209 Lark, a rocket launcher, it fires lethal explosive rockets that can kill most enemies in one hit, but can only carry 2 rockets. The alternate fire is an air brake, which will stop the rocket in midair and release smaller rockets or redirect the main rocket, which continues a straight flight path upon release of the air brake. Bullseye Mark II is an improved version of the aforementioned Bullseye weapon. It has the same abilities and secondary fire, however, the Bullseye Mark II shots are far more powerful than the original and also fires blue colored shots instead of red. The Mark II shot leave large open wounds that will not heal easily. Left untreated, victims can die of blood loss. The Repeater Carbine is acquired in the first level of the game if you've completed the campaign before, just inside and slightly to the left of the doorway to the first building you enter. Primary fire discharges the weapon in the player's right hand, and secondary fire discharges the left weapon hand. Right hand and left weapon hands have independent targeting reticules that lock onto enemies in your field of view. Arc Charger fires a blast of energy in the form of an electric arc, which briefly clings to organic tissue. Additional blasts increase the intensity of the energy. This bolt of electricity has the ability to arc to other enemies, but the gun needs to be charged first. The more the arc charger fires, the more it charges, and the more enemies the bolt will arc to. The L-11-2 Dragon is acquired near the end of the game, if you've completed the campaign before. The primary fire expels flame. The secondary fire releases a burst of flammable gas into the air, creating a longer lasting area of flame. It's a splitter. It's acquired very late in the game, if you have completed the campaign before. The primary fire is an explosive pack, while the secondary fire will continuously split until it is fully split. This is only able to be used by the players. This weapon is not available in multiplayer. The Fragmentation Grenade, a standard issue anti-personnel munition used throughout the British Armed Forces. The grenade has an exposed fuse which releases irritating smoke prior to detonation. Hedgehog Grenade. This anti-personnel munition is used by the hybrids. It will release spikes after detonation. The spikes will fly off in all directions and kill or badly damage anything they hit unless it's using cover. Airfield Grenade. While the origin of this grenade is unclear, it is the most powerful grenade in the game. The airfield grenade will stick to most surfaces, including enemies, and release a flammable gas. It will then ignite the gas and instantly kill whatever is caught in it or set on fire. The Black Lash Grenade. It will create a bubble that reflects fire from the Chimeran weapons, but allows fire from human weapons to tunnel through. It will also injure any Chimera that pass through it. It is useless against the Angel's gas. Wow, okay, that was a lot of weapons. I know what you may be thinking. Am I going to do this for every game? No, I will only bring up new weapons. The main reason we're going so in-depth on these games is because I'm trying to give you guys as much information as I possibly can, and also I just want to give you guys a long video to be able to listen to. Now let's move on to the enemies. Resistance Fall of Man has a total of 19 enemies, with them being a mixture of foot soldiers, vehicles, or even quadruped or flying enemies. I'm going to go in alphabetical order of the enemies rather than the order they're encountered in. Why? Because it's easier for me. Starting out with the Advanced Hybrid. They're much more durable than the traditional hybrids. They stand around 7 feet in height and serve as elite commandos, sometimes leading even steelheads into combat. Advanced hybrids are also equipped with very heavy armor and eye masks as well as the Bullseye Mark II. Advanced hybrids are only encountered in the tower level. The Angels. This strain commanded the Chimeran hierarchy by maintaining a telepathic hive mind over the lesser strains. Due to their delicate telepathic connections, the lesser Chimera were deeply dependent on the Angels. Should an Angel die, the lesser strains under the Angel's control will die as well within a few minutes without the presence of another Angel. Angels are first encountered in the tower. Angels shoot poisonous spikes that excrete large amounts of toxic gas at the player, which then spreads across the ground. Burrower.
Oh my gosh, I can't say it.
Burrower is an armored worm-like vehicle used by the Chimera to transport infantry and dig tunnels. In Cheshire, one can briefly be seen when the player is traversing the underground tunnels. It crashes from one wall to another right in front of the player, but the movement of the machine is so quick that it's difficult to attain any real details. In the final level of Cheshire, doing the sub-level Angel, one breaches the room and deploys Chimeran troops from its mouth. The player gets to see only the frontal part of one. Carriers are a strain of Chimera, which serve a non-combat role in which they journey to the battlefield to collect infected humans who have succumbed to a crawler attack and transport them to conversion centers. The Chimeran dropship is an armed shuttle that provides transportation and limited levels of close air support for Chimeran ground troops. Crawlers are small beetle-like parasites that serve as the Chimera's method of reproduction by spreading the Chimeran virus. The strain is capable of limited flight, but they are often deployed by Spire missiles. They are also kept in conversion centers and sent into holding pens where uninfected prisoners are kept. Upon locating their target, the crawlers begin to penetrate the victim's body, usually through the airway passages of the mouth or the nose. Once this has been accomplished, they begin to inject the Chimeran virus throughout the body. After this process is completed, the crawlers decompose into the host body and complete the infection stage. After the crawlers have merged into the host, who then abruptly falls into a coma, the virus begins the process of an inexorable conversion of the host into a Chimeran creature. A Goliath is a massive walking siege battery employed by the Chimera to assault fortified military bases or civilian settlements. Goliaths are primarily armed with concussion mortar batteries that soften up enemy opposition. Entire companies have broken under the mortar barrages of the Goliath, the human soldiers simply fleeing for their lives. Ironically, this only exposes them to the Goliath's most fearsome weapon, Spire missiles, which deliver crawlers and spinners that can affect thousands. Greyjacks are decrepit hybrids that have almost outgrown their bodies. They are not an individual strain of Chimera, since they are simply elderly hybrids. They exclusively appear in Resistance Fall of Man. Despite their unarmed and lanky appearance, they nonetheless remain dangerous for possessing a long reach and wicked claws, giving them a devastating close-range attack. Hardfangs are a breed of Chimera, similar to the hybrids, but are known to be tougher and crueler. Hardfangs were seemingly created to be shock troops, as their conversion process have been skewed in favor of heightening the creature's aggression and eliminating all self-preservation instinct. They rush into battle wielding an arc charger to hit as many targets as possible before they are taken down by human forces. Howlers are a strain of large quadrupedal chimera. Howlers are presumed to have been created from ordinary animals that have been infected by the Chimeran virus or have been purposely bred like the Widowmaker. Hybrids are the basic foot soldiers of the Chimeran army, and are the most commonly encountered enemy throughout the Resistance series. Created from infected human hosts via conversion centers, hybrids make up the bulk of the Chimeran military. All hybrids use the bullseye and carry hedgehog grenades. They are sometimes led by steelheads. Despite their low rank, they have relatively high hit points for a standard enemy, taking multiple headshots from most weapons, and will use their durability to close in on the player's position while under fire, often charging forward while firing from the hip. Leapers are a strain of Chimera that are the byproduct of a crawler's failure to find a suitable host form, resembling a mix between a lizard and a scorpion. When crawlers fail to find a host, they feed on the corpses of animals or humans and cocoon themselves in leaper pods. Once they are matured, the pods open to spawn leapers. Young leapers are voracious creatures that attack their foes with their claws and teeth and can climb along walls and ceilings. Menials are a strain of Chimera that are not intended for combat, but rather the process of basic labor. As such, they are the worker caste of the Chimeran hierarchy. Menials were tasked in non-combative duties, such as overseeing conversion centers. They are known to ignore other Chimera as they mindlessly continue their duties. Such a role makes them rarely seen in combat operations, as they are unarmed as well as both sluggish and non-aggressive. However, it should be noted that they are unpredictable creatures, which makes them dangerous. During gameplay, menials attack the player by sluggishly approaching them, then grabbing and viciously mauling them, or, the less common form of attack, simply hitting the player. Rollers are the final life cycle stage of the Chimeran crawler. As a leaper ages, its body begins to disintegrate, and increasingly produces corrosive chemicals as it nears death and becomes a roller. As a roller, the creature uses this apparent shortcoming to its advantage by spraying this acidic bile from its mouth, blinding opponents before the creature moves in for a finishing attack using its claws and teeth. Slip skulls are small, agile, and a fast enemy that can cling to surfaces. This makes the slip skull a difficult target to hit, A cunning strain, slip skulls prefer attacking enemies with blindsiding attacks and pot shots rather than facing them directly. Once detected, it is necessary to eliminate these creatures as soon as possible before they summon reinforcements. The Stalker is a Chimeran mobile heavy weapons platform. These vehicles are equipped with anti-aircraft autocannons, a missile pod, and an anti-personnel gun. This allows a single Stalker to destroy an enemy air support on the battlefield, making it nigh impossible to land safely. The machine's multi-legged locomotion also provides superior maneuverability over almost all forms of terrain. Stalkers serve as mini-bosses and drivable vehicles for the player throughout the game. The Stalker first appears in Manchester, Outgunned. The Steelhead is a powerful strain of Chimera that are a superiorly engineered version of the hybrid variant. The Steelhead strain can be easily recognized from the metallic headgear they wear, hence their name. Steelheads possess heavy armor, which allows them to be at the forefront of any battle where they lead lower Chimeran strains in combat. They're capable, and even willing, to endure any form of punishment to advance the Chimeran invasion, even if they must die in the process. Steelheads are taller than a hybrid, though their stooped posture means they do stand somewhat shorter in practice. They are often considered the Chimeran equivalent of a commissioned officer and act as commanders that lead allies into battle, especially hybrids. Hybrids are also noticeably more aggressive when led by a Steelhead. Titans are extremely large and powerful Chimera. They are very durable and possess superhuman strength. Titans are used as shock troops and are often found leading the way in major attacks. Their size and strength enable them to wield extremely heavy weaponry found mounted on vehicles or strategic defenses, such as Stalker heavy siege pods. The Titan is said to represent the current limit of Chimeran ability to alter the human form, requiring multiple human bodies to create. Titans are dimensionally smaller than Widowmakers, but more massively built, and of similar size to Angels. A Titan first appears in Nottingham Conduits, in which a Titan kills several British soldiers inside a collapsed train tunnel. Titans are incredibly powerful and hard to kill. A Titan's melee attack can make quite a dent in a player's health or even instantly kill the player. This, however, can also work to a player's advantage, since Titans are somewhat indiscriminate when killing targets. Their friendly fire has, on occasion, even killed fellow Chimera. Titans have 4 attacks. At long range, they will charge up and fire their Stalker siege pod, shooting a single medium speed rocket with a fair amount of splash damage. They usually shoot directly at the middle of the player's hitbox, meaning a shot that misses will usually fly off into the distance. At short range, they can roar, producing a large, low damage splash effect around them, or swipe at the player with their siege pod. Sometimes in hard mode, the Titan will fire a homing rocket from the Stalker's siege pod, compromising a player's cover. This attack is a one-shot kill and will only be found rarely in hard mode. Finally, the Widowmaker. Widowmakers are a large strain of Chimera. They are the approximate equivalent of a main battle tank. Widowmakers are giant arachnoid-like creatures that make use of their barbed foretalons to attack their enemies, though they have been observed to make use of explosive globs that they spew out in combat, much like the Sapper. Okay, so we covered the story, weapons, and the enemies. Now, let's move on to the multiplayer. Resistance featured a multiplayer mode for up to 40 players online and up to 4 players offline. It offered 6 game modes: Deathmatch, Team Deathmatch, Capture the Flag, Meltdown, Assault, and Breach. The multiplayer features 11 different maps along with 4 DLC maps. The multiplayer mode enables players to create their own clan and create their own matches. Custom matches allow hosts to set different parameters such as hit points and weapon sets. Custom matches already in progress can also be joined, and the player can join matches of their choice with the filter that detects matches meeting the player's chosen criteria. Or, players could join preset games, ranked games. Ranked matches give the player experience, which will allow the player to move up different ranks. As the player moves up ranks, special rewards are unlocked for their character. Vehicles found in the campaign mode are not featured in multiplayer. The multiplayer mode featured 60 levels for players to progress through, these levels being divided into 20 distinct ranks with 3 tiers each, with the top rank being Supreme Commander. Reaching Supreme Commander also unlocked Nathan Hale as a multiplayer skin. On December 11th, 2008, all map packs for Resistance Fall of Man were made available for free as a holiday gift from Insomniac due to the release of a Resistance 2. Players have the choice to be either human or chimera. Each have their own strengths, weaknesses, and abilities. Humans possess advanced radar that detects friends and foes. Humans are also smaller, thus making them harder to hit, and possess the ability to crouch. Human players also spawn equipped with 1 fragmentation grenade, and their default weapon is the M5A2 carbine. Chimera are larger and make easier targets, but they also possess rage mode. This allows them to run faster, see enemies through walls at a short distance, and increase their weapon damage. Rage mode can cause the Chimera to overheat and lose up to half of their health if left on for too long. When in rage mode, for a certain amount of time, flames will show up on the Chimera's back, making it more visible. The Chimera also lack the ability to crouch. Their default weapon is the bullseye. They do not spawn with grenades. The online servers for the game, and the sequels, were originally scheduled to be shut down on March 28th of 2014. However, Insomniac Games announced a short extension to give fans a final chance to play the online modes, and the servers were officially shut down on April 8th of 2014. Resistance Fall of Man holds the record for best-selling platform-exclusive shooter for the PlayStation 3, reaching over 4.15 million units sold worldwide, with 2.7 million of those coming within the first year of release. Unfortunately, the later entries on this list would not achieve this level of financial success, with each occurring entry receiving less and less sales numbers. Resistance Fall of Man was generally met with praise from critics, with many reviewers such as IGN, GameFAQs, and Metacritic all giving the game high ratings. According to Metacritic, within the first few hours of the PlayStation 3's Japanese launch, the game had already received praise from some publications. Famitsu gave the game a score of 33 out of 40. IGN was the first Western website to review the game, with the reviewer Jeremy Dunham declaring that while other consoles had to wait years to get their killer app, PlayStation 3 users get theirs on day one. The scores at the time of the European launch were less brilliant. Eurogamer's UK review complained that, while functional and even occasionally entertaining, the gameplay completely failed to innovate. The Eurogamer's UK would not be alone in the heavy criticism of this title either, with the New York Times giving it an average review saying that, in spite of rave reviews, it's a very pedestrian human versus aliens first-person shooter that brings nothing new to the genre. The artificial intelligence of combatants is lackluster, and the semi-sepia-toned graphics are surprisingly unimpressive, no better than what you would see on the 5-year-old Xbox. But overall, the general consensus of critics would say that the game is good and worth a buy. On the other hand, from personal research I found through forums, the opinion of gamers is somewhat mixed. Some of them say it's one of their favorite shooters of all time, praising how well they believe it holds up to today. Meanwhile, others say it was anything but great, and simply a bland and generic shooter. Looking at this from a bird's eye view, it is a linear hallway shooter, and unfortunately the main character isn't exactly radiating charisma to be memorable. Let's be honest, many players more than likely remember the enemies more than they do the main character. And the game wasn't exactly breaking any new ground when it comes to mechanics or story. The most notable feature of this game would probably go to its multiplayer with its support of up to 40 players. This was, at the time, one of the highest player counts seen for an FPS. Although if you know, it certainly wasn't the highest. Don't worry Mag fans, that video's coming. Finally, it's a launch exclusive. Would this game have sold as well if it wasn't a launch exclusive? In my opinion, I don't believe it would have. Launch exclusives are typically the biggest games you'll have on consoles for the initial year of release, with many of the bigger and longer lasting titles coming out later. The game was decent, but at the same time, the seeds of developer abandonment were already planted early into this franchise's life cycle. Resistance Fall of Man was an explosive entry and financial success for Insomniac Games, and Sony would reward them by keeping them as an exclusive game developer. Part of the reason for Resistance's initial success is because of it being a launch title, as I mentioned. And let's be perfectly honest, the launch titles for the PlayStation 3 weren't exactly anything spectacular, with some of the only other notable titles being Call of Duty 3, Marvel's Ultimate Alliance, and MotorStorm. FPS-wise, Resistance's only real competition was Call of Duty 3, which is frequently cited by critics and fans alike as one of the weakest entries of the series. So it can be safe to say that Resistance had little resistance itself. Okay, I'll see my way out for that one. While it may not have been groundbreaking or necessarily that amazing of a game, the fact it had little opposition and had the lucky deal of being a launch title would make sure it would become a main series for the PlayStation and Sony, at least for some time. Following the massive financial success of Fall of Man, a sequel for the Resistance franchise wasn't just expected, it was demanded. Insomniac had proven that there was a fanbase and market for such a franchise. With the expectation of a sequel, the mission objective of Insomniac was to go bigger and bolder. And in November of 2008, Insomniac would deliver. Unlike the first game, Resistance 2 would be met with a more unbalanced reception. While it was still seen as a positively reviewed sequel, it took on more criticism as well. most of these stemming from complaints about the story and aspects of the campaign, as well as certain changes the game made compared to its predecessor. While I can't find a specific date for when development of the sequel began, we can speculate that it began directly after the release of the first game, as there is only a 2-year gap between releases. And the ending of the first game being a cliffhanger seems like the sequel was already being planned before the release of the first game. With the critical success of Resistance: Fall of Man, Insomniac sought to further the hype of the sequel with an interesting marketing strategy. On July 3rd of 2008, ProjectAbraham.com was launched as part of the marketing campaign. It centers around a top-secret military project, codenamed Project Abraham, under the jurisdiction of the U.S. Department of War and was conducted between October and December 1950 by the Special Research Projects Administration, as a means to find a cure to the Chimeran virus. Volunteers were injected with experimental vaccines to the virus, followed by a dose of the Chimeran virus itself. The results were often gruesome and unsuccessful. The project occurs before the events of Resistance: Fall of Man. The community also got to vote on which of the volunteers would receive treatments to become immune, and the website would update with videos progressing the story. The duration of this marketing spanned from July 3rd to October 30th, with more clues and updates being discovered as time went on. While it did start on July 3rd, technically it started on July 1st from a Game Pro magazine release which featured a story about Resistance 2. In this, it contained a pamphlet titled Popular Technologies, with the visible URL for the website getawarjob.com and a phone number to join the US military. The pamphlet contained a cryptic puzzle which was solved by July 3rd and led you to the website ProjectAbraham.com. And if you're wondering, no, the website is not available anymore, I already checked. I think this was a pretty cool marketing trick. It's honestly something we don't really see as often anymore. This only helped solidify the hype of the sequel, of course, as it was a way to get fans to be constantly involved with the game and not forget about it. Also a quick fact, the videos for this teaser featured Katie Sackhoff, the voice and live action actor for Bo-Katan from Star Wars. In a developer interview, when asked what the first thing they knew had to be done with Resistance 2, Ted Price answered with co-op.
When you're starting Resistance 2, what was the first thing that you knew you had to do with Resistance 2?
Co-op. Simple. I mean, when we were doing our presentations for Resistance 1 in the very beginning, that was the number one question we got was, why don't you have online co-op? We had co-op, but people wanted to be sure that they could play with their buddies online.
But this time around, a focus on online co-op instead of couch. Also, according to the developers, a way to make players not break the game by going into the water was by implementing an invincible creature, the Furies, to stop the player from being able to progress.
Let's talk about some of the other focuses, and we're going to get into some of the early decisions that we made on Resistance 2. But a good question from Devil May Cry on IG.com said, there seemed like you guys had a huge focus on water.
Do you remember the Fury debate?
Oh yeah. Well, I know it ended up basically becoming the most probably expensive lava anyone's ever made in games, right? It was we had places that had water and you couldn't go or you would break the game, and it was like, it sucks that you're sitting there shooting that thing and it won't die, but if you kill it, you can jump in and break the game. And at that point, I think it was just like we've kind of painted ourselves into a corner.
Yeah, we had to make it invisible.
During the demo of R2 at E3, Ted Price was on stage showcasing it. In this showcase, he was not only talking, but having to play the game at the same time. And at the time, the level was not fully polished, and so if he fell behind or got stuck at any point in the level, it would have ended the game, or potentially crashed. And Ted almost got stuck on a couch in the level. Thankfully, he was able to react quick enough to get around it to continue the showcase, averting a disastrous showcase at E3.
And I was thinking, okay, I have about a second to get unstuck before the game basically doesn't crash, but ends. And it would have been the worst demo in the history of E3 at that.
And of course, everyone was in Ratchet conference room at the time watching Tag going, oh my god, oh, he's off the couch. She's off the couch.
I just felt bad for the environment artist you fired for that. That's not true.
R2 would also become the first game in which Insomniac has utilized motion capture animation. Finally, while Insomniac crafted Resistance 2 to have a bleaker tone than its predecessor, some parts of the game felt more in line with the Hollywood blockbuster movie. These parts being the super scale boss fights included in the game, like the Kraken and Leviathan. Additionally, the game was given more color and things were made to look quote-unquote prettier. The overall plot itself may have had a bleaker tone, but the art style and gameplay mechanics seemingly contradicted that tone at the same time. The story of Resistance 2 picks up right where Fall of Man left off. But unlike the sequel, the game would no longer be narrated by Rachel Parker, and instead focuses entirely on Hale. Soldiers from the Special Research Projects Administration, or SRPA, led by Major Richard Blake, take custody of Sergeant Nathan Hale. They transport him to SRPA Station Igloo, an American black site in Iceland, but are soon shot down by Chimeran forces that are attacking the base to free Daedalus, an advanced Chimeran creature being observed by Dr. Fyodor Malikov. Blake attempted to eliminate Daedalus, but accidentally frees him as he had to undo the safety protocols put in place to contain Daedalus. Daedalus soon escapes after leaving a cryptic message to Hale. The SRPA are forced to abandon the base. Blake later explains to Hale that he is part of Project Abraham, a covert effort to create super soldiers infused with the Chimeran virus, known as Sentinels. 2 years later, Hale is promoted to lieutenant and given the command of Echo Team, consisting of Benjamin Warner, Joseph Capelli, and Aaron Hawthorne. With this series of events, we know the real reason as to why Nathan was able to survive the infection within the first game. On May 15, 1953, the Chimera launched a full-scale invasion of the United States by attacking the west and east coasts with an aerial fleet of airships. Among the targets is SRPA-3 in San Francisco, where Hale is scheduled to undergo inhibitor treatment to prevent the Chimeran virus completely taking him over. With the Blake providing backup, Hale oversees a full evacuation and retrieves inhibitor samples for the Sentinels. The survivors retreat to the Midwest, where they track a damaged Chimeran flagship to Ulrich, California. Hijacking a Chimeran shuttle, Echo Team boards the ship to destroy it with explosives. Hale soon discovers from the ship's control room that the Chimera are planning to breach the Liberty defense perimeter at Twin Falls, Idaho. Echo Team travels to Twin Falls and activates the defense towers, resulting in an artillery barrage that breaks the Chimeran offensive. Hale later defies orders to return for needed inhibitor treatment and takes a squad to Station Genesis to extract Dr. Malikov, as the Chimeran fleet's flagship under Daedalus had attacked the base to reactivate the local Chimeran tower. After coming to Malikov's rescue, Hale is unable to stop Daedalus from reactivating the tower. He also learns from Malikov that Daedalus was a human known as Private Jordan Shepard, one of the first test subjects of Project Abraham alongside with Hale. Shepard had been injected with pure Chimeran DNA, which quickly overwhelmed his weakened immune system and mutated him into his current form. Malikov also warns Hale that the same will eventually happen to him unless he receives treatment. After rescuing Malikov, Hale is united with the Echo Team, and they proceed to Chicago, where the Chimera have begun to restart their network of towers. SRPA forces defeat the Chimera that were defending the tower, including a massive Chimeran creature called the Leviathan, and Malikov successfully disables the tower. However, Daedalus reactivates the tower remotely from his command center in Iceland. SRPA forces later launch an attempt to breach the tower at Holar but are overwhelmed by heavy Chimeran forces. Against orders to retreat, Echo Team enters the tower and tries to eliminate Daedalus, but Warner and Hawthorne are killed by Daedalus, who then badly wounds Hale. Capelli manages to save Hale. 6 weeks later, the Liberty defense perimeter had fell to the Chimera, killing 80 million survivors and forcing the remaining 3 million to evacuate to a poorly supplied refugee camp in Louisiana. Hale had been in a coma before finally waking up, discovering that his condition has become irreversible, and according to Malikov, he only has a few hours left before the infection consumes him. Capelli informs Hale of the situation and that Daedalus's fleet had moved to the Chicxulub crater in the Yucatan Peninsula for unknown reasons. I hope I said those words right. Hale, Capelli, and Blake plan to make a final stand to stop whatever the Chimera's intentions are and to finally kill Daedalus. The group infiltrate Daedalus's flagship with a nuclear warhead, hoping to detonate it near the central reactor and trigger an explosion that wipes out the entire fleet. Unfortunately, Blake and his team are intercepted and killed by the Chimera, who take the bomb to Daedalus. Entering the core room, Hale battles and kills Daedalus. Hale is drawn to Daedalus's corpse, and upon touching it, he inadvertently absorbs Daedalus's powers and is granted psychokinetic abilities. After priming the bomb, Hale escapes with Capelli on a Chimeran shuttle as the bomb detonates and wipes out the entire fleet. The resulting electromagnetic shockwave disables their shuttle, causing them to crash land. Capelli wakes up and finds Hale standing outside, staring at the sky that is now occupied by 2 planets. Hale then turns his attention to Capelli, revealing to him that he has fully succumbed to the Chimeran virus, and he tells Capelli that this is just the beginning. Capelli, realizing that he had no choice, reluctantly executes Hale with a gunshot to the head. The sequel would emulate more mechanics from other modern shooters at the time. For instance, it did away with the weapon wheel for the player and instead opted for only holding 2 weapons at a time, as well as dwindling down on the number of grenades the player could carry. Just like Call of Duty, Resistance would now also adopt the regenerative health mechanic, where as long as you stay out of the line of sight and stop receiving damage, your health bar would begin to regenerate after a short delay. Also, the movement was modernized. No longer was there one movement speed. Instead, movement was slowed down because of the addition of the sprint feature. Finally, aiming down sights also caused the player to have a movement penalty. No longer was the circle strafing method a viable strategy playing Resistance. Resistance 2 features 14 weapons, 7 of which are returning weapons from the Fall of Man, and the other half are new ones. The first of these new weapons is the HE-44 Magnum. It's the first weapon obtained in Resistance 2 and is given by Major Blake in the SRPA Station Igloo. This Army-issued weapon features polished wooden grips, a uniform metallic body, and fires lithium-filled rounds which can be detonated after being fired using an electronic detonator. The Marksman is a reversed engineered rifle that is based on a Chimeran sniper rifle that was captured in Scotland by SRPA's Spectre team. The Marksman fires a 3-round ion burst at great speed, and its alternate fire deploys a small autonomous drone which projects short electrostatic orb bursts at nearby targets. The HVAP, High Velocity Armor Piercing Wraith, is a very powerful minigun. It has a 300-round drum magazine and can hold a total of 900 rounds. The Wraith's secondary fire deploys a frontal force barrier which shields the user and teammates from incoming fire of any type of ammunition. Similar to the Auger, bullets can be shot out of the shield, but not into it. The MP-47 Pulse Cannon is an energy weapon. The weapon's primary fire is a focused, long-range energy beam. Its secondary fire projects a short-range concussive blast capable of shredding weaker enemies. The V7 Splicer fires electromagnetic circular saw blades that are sharp enough to cut through limbs and splitting up enemies such as Grims easily. These blades can ricochet off hard surfaces. The secondary fire allows the player to increase the spin and heat up the blade before launching it at enemies. This secondary fire causes the blade to continue spinning inside the enemy, causing massive damage internally. By holding down the secondary fire button, the player can also use the Splicer as a melee weapon that works as a chainsaw. The XR-13 Belloc is a semi-automatic grenade launcher which launches explosive napalm grenades. Its secondary fire launches a pressured canister that explodes and catches fire to anything in its blast radius or touching the fire. After a short flame, the fire will then combust in a medium explosion. Lastly, there is the Spider Grenade. When the grenade has landed, it spreads a napalm-like substance which burns everything in its path. The liquid also goes up walls and ceilings, hence the name. Like weapons, Resistance 2 also featured new and returning enemies. Those new enemies were Alpha Grim, Attack Drones, Chameleons, Daedalus, Furies, Grims, Hunter Drones, the Kraken, Leeches, Leviathan, Marauders, Mother Spinner, Overseer, Patrol Drones, Primarchs, Queen Leaper, Ravagers, Spinners, and the Swarm. That's a lot of new enemies. Alpha Grims are an elite form of Grim. They serve as boss enemies in Chicago, Ulrich, Axbridge, and Holar Tower. Attack drones are large, armored, heavily armed, and are protected by an energy shield. They are equipped with a single-barreled bullseye-like weapon and a triple-barreled mini-rocket launcher. The mini-rockets are equipped with a sabot that can penetrate their target before exploding. Chameleons are fast and deadly chimera who are invisible due to being equipped with a special Chimeran cloaking device grafted to its cooling unit. They possess 10 large razor-sharp claws capable of instantly ripping and tearing a human in half. Chameleons remain motionless and invisible until a victim is close by. Then they rush in, becoming visible just before the kill. Daedalus is the Chimeran entity and main antagonist of the game. An unforeseen creation of Project Abraham, Daedalus was formerly a human being known as Jordan Shepard who was infused with pure Chimeran DNA derived from Dr. Fyodor Malakov's research. Following his escape from SRPA's captivity, Daedalus became the leader of the Chimera and was responsible for the Chimera's aggressive expansion across Earth with the goal of reactivating the dormant Chimeran towers. He was finally killed by Nathan Hale, but he was successful in achieving his plan. Furies make their first appearance in San Francisco. They are present in almost every body of water. When Nathan Hale enters the water, the Furies present in the area will automatically focus on him and chase him down. Furies possess an instant death attack. Should they swim to the player close enough, a special scene will play in which the Fury will grab Hale and then fatally bite him. They can swim at a faster pace than normal to attack the player, and will pursue him until either they catch him or the player leaves the water. The Grimm strain are the latest byproduct of the Chimera's conversion process and are created by using spinners, which capture human hosts which are then weaved in cocoons. The cocoon slowly rebuilds the host as they are converted into a Grimm. Unlike the other strains, Grimms are an undesirable byproduct of the conversion process in which they are described as half-baked hybrids, as they hatched from their cocoons before they are fully converted. Hunter drones are medium-sized drones that have a weapon similar to the bullseye, but fires with much more distance between shots and at a faster rate. Like patrol drones, they normally attack in swarms, but in lower numbers. The Kraken is a large amphibious creature named after the legendary sea monsters of the same name. The creature has a gaping maw with jagged teeth and 4 tentacles, each tipped with mechanical drills that can split into claws. It also belches out poisonous stank breath. The Kraken serves as a boss enemy in the San Francisco level, where it attacks SRPA-3 and allows Furies to enter the base. An evolutionary offshoot of the Grimm, leeches are disposable, biological bombers designed to kill their prey. They pulse with highly toxic and explosive blood. Leeches rush their targets in a suicidal run and self-explode on contact. Their thin hides make them easy to take down with any standard firearm. However, they can sprint across great distances at a rapid pace, which makes shooting them at close range a deadly proposition. The Leviathan is a 300-foot tall chimera. Only 2 Leviathans were ever reported. Described as the largest creature ever to have walked the earth, these bipedal creatures possess a large cooling device on their back as well as durable skin. The Leviathan serves as a boss enemy in the Chicago mission. It is assumed that thousands of bodies would have been necessary to create it. The Marauder is a 2-story tall bipedal creature with no arms, resembling a Tyrannosaurus rex. It has a mouth full of razor-sharp teeth and a deafening roar. In its mouth is a flamethrower-like weapon which launches its venomous saliva, which catches fire and propagates at an alarming rate, causing severe tissue damage to anyone who comes in contact with it. It serves as a boss enemy in the Cocodrie level. The Mother Spinner serves as a boss enemy in Twin Falls, an enormous creature that resembles a cross between a spider and a scorpion. The Mother Spinner is equipped with razor-sharp pincers, a pair of mandibles, acidic venom, and a large tail with a stinger. It has the ability to summon swarms of leapers. Overseers are advanced versions of Chimera strains that only appear in Resistance 2 co-op mode. They are responsible for controlling and commanding Primarchs in the Chimeran army and hold positions of command. They each control around 12 Primarchs. They are noticeably much larger than their respective strains and wield extremely powerful weaponry. Patrol drones are lightly armed with a weapon similar to the bullseye, which rapidly fires projectiles that become deadly when hit multiple times. They also travel in large numbers, adding up to 20, and they can appear alongside other types of drones. Primarchs are advanced elite chimera of certain strains that appear only in Resistance 2 co-op mode. They control about 40 normal chimera and are extremely influential in ground operations. They are subservient to the Overseers. In co-op, they are distinguished for having a health bar and 1 to 3 stars over their heads. Queen Leapers are an elite strain of Leapers that only appear in Resistance 2 co-op mode. Serving as command units to Leapers, Queen Leapers are noted to be roughly 5 times bigger than the average Leaper, with roughly 10 times more health, similar to the Alpha Grimm. Interestingly, despite being a Leaper, Queen Leapers bear a similar appearance to those of Rollers. Ravagers are engineered as a physically superior chimera. They are noticeable for their tail structure and musculoskeletal mutation, which makes them dangerous and powerful as 10 hybrids. However, their massive size slows down their movement. To compensate their lack of speed, Ravagers are equipped with energy shields while armed with powerful weapons such as the Brute minigun. Ravagers are brutal melee fighters who often charge full speed at their targets. Spinners are the Chimera's recent alternative of infecting human hosts and creating new Chimeran strains in response to the aftermath of Operation Overstrike, in which the carrier strain was compromised and exterminated by Dr. Claude's serum, lessening the Chimera's need of conversion centers. Just like the Crawlers, Spinners were loaded and released from Spire missiles upon human-populated areas, as they seek to capture humans and weave them into cocoons, hence the name. From here, hosts are transformed into Grimms. The Swarm is a newly evolved form of the Crawler strain, in which its existence was made known in Station Genesis. Likely due to the Spinner strain that replaced the role of the Crawlers, the Chimera reutilized the Crawlers into a more deadlier entity. The Swarm is able to digest metals that then become infused into its exoskeleton, which their bodies compose of approximately 80% titanium silver alloy by weight. As a result, the Swarm is highly resilient against human firearms. However, the Swarm is highly electrically conductive and therefore vulnerable to electrical weaponry. As you can see, the ambition to make the game bigger and better was true. With half the roster being new weapons to use and many new enemies to fight, This game delivered on its promise of expanding on the first game. This ambition also trickled into multiplayer as well. While the original game had a limit of 40 players per match, Resistance 2 would expand this size to a total of 60 players per match. In total, there are 13 maps in multiplayer, with 3 of those being included in the Aftermath DLC. There are 2 different modes for multiplayer: co-op and competitive. Unlike Resistance: Fall of Man, there is no co-op story mode in R2. Instead, this co-op mode features a separate campaign mode which runs parallel to the single-player campaign. The co-op campaign supports anything from 2 to 8 players, taking the role of a special forces group called Spectre Team. Players are tasked with many randomized objectives around the map, while defeating hordes of Chimera in the process. The strength of the enemy forces is altered based on the number of players and their skill levels. There are 3 classes to choose from: Special Ops, long-distance damage dealers, who also provide ammunition, soldiers, the tanks who deal the most damage, and medics, who drain the life from enemies and heal teammates. Competitive mode features support for up to 60 players at any given time, the highest number of players for any PlayStation 3 online game as of R2's release. 5 game modes are available: Deathmatch, Team Deathmatch, Core Control, Skirmish, Meltdown, which involved players getting split into squads of 6 and take part in objective-based proxy battles. Players can play as either the human or the Chimera. Maps have varying sizes and layouts for the different game modes and number of players. Both multiplayer modes track the player's performance, gaining experience points and leading to benefits and rewards, as well as assigning the player a skill ranking. Custom games also made a return, although unlike Resistance: Fall of Man, players cannot receive XP in custom games. The ranking system is also identical to that of Fall of Man, with players progressing through 20 ranks with 3 tiers, each from Private up to Supreme Commander, making a total of 60 ranks. As some ranks are gained, players receive unlockable rewards such as berserks and skins. Both co-op and competitive modes are available in split screen, but only co-op mode is available both offline and online. Originally, drivable vehicles were set to appear in multiplayer but cut out due to time constraints. The R2 servers have since closed on April 8th, 2014. R2 is considered the weakest entry in the trilogy, from what I can gather. But, and this is an important note here, that's the internet's opinion. Critics and even many other fans alike say that R2 is actually their favorite. Even looking into reviews for this game, I found many people commenting on how they actually loved R2 and could only find a few outliers of people saying that it wasn't good. So why is it then that the opinion on this seems divided? Well, for starters, let's go back to the gameplay. The removal of the weapon wheel is one of the biggest changes that many fans don't like. This change, to try and make this series more modern, wasn't exactly praised at the time, especially considering how this shooter wasn't necessarily an easy game. It felt like you were almost being handicapped on purpose by not having access to a weapon wheel this time. The enemies themselves haven't changed, so they still took a lot of damage just like the first game. So not having access to additional weaponry made fighting them a real pain. This change made it feel like Resistance lost a bit of its uniqueness at the time in favor of appealing to other shooters like COD and Halo. And of course, removing the option of co-op and story mode is something that some fans didn't like. Although I'd say it was made up for, as many gamers stated that they really enjoyed the new version of co-op mode in multiplayer. Finally, once again, the protagonist. While a game doesn't need to have a character that is loved or adored by all fans, you at least need them to be interesting. Hale in himself is really just a soldier needing to do what he has to, which isn't bad. How many of you love Ramirez from Modern Warfare? A silent protagonist who genuinely has zero personality. While it can work, it just doesn't work in Resistance 2. Hale is just seemingly bland compared to other protagonists at the time like Master Chief. Additionally, I will say that most of the sales from this title come from the eccentric marketing campaign of Project Abraham. As I mentioned earlier, you just really don't see that kind of thing anymore with games. So pre-established fans of the franchise were excited, and this marketing ploy was able to get more gamers in on the fun as well. Honestly, although the game is good by most standards, I'd say if it wasn't for this being a sequel and the marketing, I'm not sure how well it would have stood on its own. I don't believe it would have sold nearly as many copies, and it may have even ended with this game. Thankfully though, that wasn't the case. At least not yet. Resistance 2, as of today, has sold a total of 2.8 to 3 million copies worldwide. The game debuted to lower sales than its predecessor, around 385,000 within the first month, which is to be expected as this was not a launch title. Although it may not have achieved the high sales numbers like Fall of Man, Resistance 2 would end up having a higher sales number than Resistance 3, with the Resistance 3 having even lower sales, and significantly lower than Resistance 2 as well. Resistance 2 was not a perfect game. I mean, it's hard to say a game is perfect anyways, but in some ways it did improve upon its previous title. The game is bigger by pretty much every aspect possible, and it does play better with it adapting to a more modern playstyle, but this is at the cost of upsetting the die-hard fans of the franchise. And while the story doesn't have a charismatic lead, it is interesting and cool enough to be memorable and fun. While we may have lost the ability to fight through the campaign with a friend, we also gained a killer online co-op mode, so the trade-off seems worth it for the most part. Plus, the multiplayer was also improved, with the lobby size being increased even more. Overall, I would say that Resistance 2 is a good sequel. It may not be something that is for all Resistance fans, but it was good enough to keep the franchise stable and attract enough gamers in it for it to garner enough attention to keep the franchise going. But this wouldn't last long. In between the release of R2 and R3, a spin-off game was released, Resistance Retribution, in 2009. It was a third-person shooter developed by Bend Studio and published by Sony for the PlayStation Portable, the PSP. This game is set in between the other spin-off and Resistance 2, and obviously the first one to not be developed by Insomniac. The game offered 8-player online multiplayer, with Team Deathmatch, Capture the Flag, Containment, Free-for-all, and Assimilation. This game had a surprising amount of features for a portable game, one of them being that you could actually connect it to your PlayStation 3 to play. On top of this, a new mode was announced, Infected, which was unlocked by connecting Resistance Retribution to Resistance 2 using a USB cable, going into the Resistance 2 option screen, and selecting Infect your PSP. This provides an alternate story within the alternate history. While in prison for desertion, Grayson is recruited by Spectre Lieutenant David LaSalle from the Resistance 2 storyline, and is infected with a mutated version of the Chimera virus, a different version of the virus that infects Nathan Hale. While playing in Infected mode, Grayson wears a Spectre uniform and has glowing Chimeran eyes. Characters in the story will be aware of Grayson's Chimeran infection, which will alter their behavior accordingly. He gets to use one of the new weapons from Resistance 2, the HE-44 Magnum, which fires explosive rounds that can be triggered remotely. He has regenerative health and no longer needs to look for health packs. He can breathe underwater, allowing him to reach hidden areas he could not reach before. Also, another whole class of intel are hidden throughout the levels. Collecting all of the infected intel unlocks plasma grenades and an expanded story. Infected mode ends when the player quits the game. 2 months before the Chimera's central tower in London is destroyed and their armies are defeated in Britain, British Royal Marine Lieutenant James Grayson finds his brother, Johnny, partially converted into a Chimera while on a mission to destroy one of the Chimeran conversion centers. Grayson reluctantly follows protocol regarding infected soldiers and kills Johnny, but this causes him to suffer a nervous breakdown and he deserts his troops, leading his own personal vendetta against the Chimera. After destroying 26 conversion centers, Grayson is captured by the British and put to trial for capital crimes, where he is sentenced to death for desertion. The night before his execution, Grayson is visited by Lieutenant Rain Bocard, a member of the European mainland resistance movement known as the Maquis. I think I said that right, I'm not sure. Who offers Grayson a reprieve in exchange for his aid and knowledge on conversion centers. Grayson is initially reluctant, but is more interested when he learns that Bocard and her father are developing a serum that counteract the Chimera virus. Grayson agrees to the deal, though he demands his brother's jacket as an extra condition, and is released as a mercenary contracted to the Maquis. The Maquis and the British forces, including Grayson, plan Operation Overstrike, where they will enter Europe through Rotterdam in the Netherlands, travel through Bonn, Germany, and into Luxembourg to help secure the Maquis stronghold there, and ultimately moving on to the main Chimera Tower in Paris, France. Though they suffer many casualties from coastal Chimera gun towers, the forces are able to successfully take it to Bonn. Bocard takes Grayson and the Maquis commander, Colonel Roland Mallory, on a special mission to investigate a new type of conversion center in Bonn. The group is separated, with Bocard falling into the initial stages of the conversion process, but Grayson is able to rescue her, believing her to be yet unaffected, and then destroys the facility. The troops learn that the Chimera have discovered the Maquis base in Luxembourg, and race to defend the base long enough to evacuate the personnel to their last stronghold in Reims, France. Dr. Bocard insists on staying to complete one last experiment, and as Grayson attempts to evacuate, he comes to learn that Bocard herself was infected, purposely at the conversion center in Bonn, to allow her father to gain a sample of the virus to develop a serum. However, before the serum can be created, Dr. Bocard is killed by the invading Chimera forces, but Bocard is able to finish her father's work and gains a sample. Bocard and Grayson are forced to evacuate as the base falls to the Chimera. In Rims, Grayson attempts to warn Mallory and the British about Bucard's infection, but Mallory instead locks him up, considering the act to be treasonous. While in the makeshift brig, Grayson is visited by Bucard, who seduces Grayson into having with her, before she leaves on her mission to take the serum to the Paris Tower. After Mallory and Bucard leave, Grayson is freed by his former commander, British Major Stephen Cartwright and Colonel Rachel Parker from the brig, and given a second sample of the serum to take to the tower in case Bucard fails. As he travels to Paris via old catacombs, Grayson comes across thousands of dead and mutilated female bodies awaiting to be converted by the Chimera. Grayson realizes just how selfish he has been in his vendetta against the Chimera, and leaves his brother's jacket behind while continuing on the mission. Grayson encounters Mallory as he nears the tower and discovers that he has also been infected by the virus and is purposely preventing him from reaching the tower. Grayson manages to kill Mallory and continues into the tower itself and the lair of the Chrysalis, the being believed to be controlling the Chimera. After using the serum, he discovers that the Chrysalis herself revealed to be Bucard, who has now been fully converted into a Chimera. Grayson manages to defeat the monster she has become. As it dies, Bucard's human self resurfaces and warns Grayson that the serum is only a temporary measure, as the Chimera have evolved a more advanced method of converting humans, and that they are already developing new ways to recover from their losses. She also remarks that the Chimera have already conquered worlds beyond Earth, and they are simply too evolved to defeat. As the virus consumes her utterly, Grayson kills Bucard to put her out of her misery. With the Chrysalis destroyed, the British and Maquis forces are able to destroy the Paris Tower and free Western Europe from the Chimera. After memorializing Bucard's death, Parker and Cartwright offer Grayson a commission with the British Army as a major, and returns his brother's jacket to him, encouraging him to keep it instead of placing it at Bucard's memorial. Grayson declines Parker's commission, instead enlisting as a colonel in the Maquis. Grayson leads a Maquis force into the heart of Russia to discover the source of the Chimera invasion, but Grayson goes missing in action during the battle to liberate Warsaw, though rumors spread of a British soldier in Russia that has become known as the Cloven Killer. The last scene shows Grayson standing before St. Basil's Cathedral before turning around after the end credits, revealing his eyes now golden yellow, a symptom of having been infected by the Chimera virus. For a handheld spin-off game, it was met with a surprising amount of praise. The game received pretty decent scores across the board from critics. As for fans, it seems like most fans seem to approve of this entry as well, with some here and there stating their distaste for it, of course. As far as the sales numbers go for this, the only thing I could find was from VG Charts, and it looks like the game may have sold somewhere close to 0.9 million copies worldwide. Overall, a seemingly solid entry for the Resistance franchise. Insomniac took much of Resistance 2's criticism to heart and sought to improve and even revert some of the changes that were present in 2. They really wanted to make a Resistance game for Resistance fans. With the bleak ending of Resistance 2, the tone of Resistance 3 was set to be much darker, as to portray humanity having lost the war against the Chimera, an end of days setting, if you will. And instead of having a military-centered point of view, the game would shift towards a civilian perspective to have a more personal feel to the game. The game would also bring back the almost survival horror-like vibe of the first game, something that many fans missed in Resistance 2. The game's story is inspired by Cormac McCarthy's 2006 post-apocalyptic novel, The Road, which was read by the developers during their development of Fall of Man and Resistance 2. Other post-apocalyptic movies such as The Road Warrior and Children of Men, and monster movies such as the Jurassic Park movies and King Kong also influenced the game's narrative and setting. Human weapons in the game are depicted to be worn and improvised to reflect the post-apocalyptic setting. Insomniac had long planned to set up Joseph Capelli as a protagonist of Resistance 3 during the development of Resistance 2 in its alternate reality game, Project Abraham. Resistance 3 would be considered one of, if not the best entry of the franchise, yet simultaneously would be the death of the mainline games. Like R2, development seems to have started for Resistance 3 as soon as the release of R2 dropped, and once again, it was only a 3-year development cycle. Man, remember when we used to get games this quickly? I know, I miss it too. Anyways, Insomniac used Sony's San Diego's motion capture technology to record body, facial, and vocal performances simultaneously, rather than body capture and add voices later that was previously done in their development of Resistance 2. Insomniac had actors perform alongside one another rather than record voice work individually in a recording room. If you want to see more of the behind-the-scenes development and what goes into working with this kind of technology, I highly recommend checking out this video from the NeoGamer YouTube channel. I'll have the link in the description. And the Chimera enemy AI have been improved from the previous games, in which Insomniac's cinematic traversal technology allows enemies to have a suite of context-sensitive movement options, such as cutting off and flanking players.
With every good Chimeran enemy, the first thing we kind of think about is what is the player experience that we want when they're encountering these enemies?
We definitely wanted it to be more about player choice, and for it to feel like the enemy AI was reacting to what the player was doing. And to do that, we wrote something called the job board, basically a tool that designers can use to control how many enemies can be doing what jobs in combat so that they can still have that kind of scripted, good-feeling cinematic battles. And using the job board, they can do things like assign a certain number of defenders, or a certain number of flanking enemies, or a certain number of just straight-out aggressive guys who are going to run after the player and attack. If things felt more random and you just had guys everywhere acting stupid, you can get into situations where you have big difficulty spikes or the difficulty just completely drops out. It can definitely make the player feel like they're fighting a more intelligent foe.
The arsenal in this game would take some inspiration from the previous title, Ratchet & Clank. While not being a 1-to-1 ratio, the guns would have extremely similar mechanics of both games.
It's so hard, like, always thinking of trying to think of new guns. I mean, between Ratchet and Resistance, I don't know how many guns have been through the series. What is going to be different? What else is left? What have we not done?
A lot of times we will go back to the Ratchet weapons and say, okay, it's kind of like this weapon, but we want to obviously make it different for this. So the best thing about having such a lineage of having exotic weapons is we can go back through our kind of library of effects and library of functionality and say, what worked, what didn't work, and what can we bring to the table here.
Originally, the weapons were going to have 5 to 10 smaller upgrades each, but apparently they were called out internally for not being Insomniac enough, so instead they were redesigned to make every weapon unique. On October 11, 2009, a billboard for Resistance 3 was spotted on location in Shreveport, Louisiana. The billboard was seen on the set of the 2011 film Battle Los Angeles, which was being produced by Columbia Pictures. On the third Battle Los Angeles trailer, the Resistance 3 billboard is visible. When asked for a comment by IGN.com, an Insomniac Games representative said, "We've made no announcements at this time."
Okay.
The billboard was taken down several days after the photo was leaked onto the internet. And on August 12th of 2010, Insomniac teased the world with this: "Congrats to Irrational Games on revealing BioShock Infinite. Trailer looks great. We can barely resist joining the announcement fun." And 5 days later, on a Tuesday, they officially announced Resistance 3 on Twitter with these comments: "We are ecstatic to announce Ratchet & Clank All for One, 4-player and same-screen drop-in, drop-out co-op coming to PlayStation 3 in fall 2011, which was then preceded by, oh, you wanted Resistance? Well, why not 2 games? We are also incredibly excited to finally announce Resistance 3 coming to PlayStation 3 in 2011. Now, if you remember for Resistance 2, there was the Project Abraham for the marketing side of things. Resistance 3 would also have a marketing push with an IRL marketing event in the Netherlands and a social media game. In the Netherlands, a dozen Chimeran skulls were scattered at the Leidsplein. I don't know if I said that right. Once again, I'm not sure. I'm sorry if I mispronounce it. It was a square in Amsterdam, Netherlands. This was done on September 7th, 2011 to promote the release of Resistance 3. The Resistance logo also appeared on various traffic lights in Amsterdam, and yeah, I'm not even sure how I pronounce that. Meanwhile, worldwide, there was the release of Global Resistance, a social media strategy game, where players could choose to play as a human or chimera. It also featured exclusive unlockable content for Resistance 3, which includes multiplayer skins and concept artworks. The game was disabled when the multiplayer servers for the Resistance trilogy closed on April 8th of 2014, and for the 5 people who bought it. Resistance 3 had the PlayStation Move motion support. If you don't know what that is, it's basically like the Wii controllers in a Kinect system. It had a camera that would follow the wands you were using, and this allowed for things like the Doomsday edition of Resistance 3 to include a motion tracker gun for the game. Let me know if you've ever used those, because I don't know of a single person who actually bought these. Additionally, Resistance 3 would include some pre-order bonuses, but the rewards varied depending on where you pre-ordered from. And look, I'm gonna be honest here, I've gamed basically my entire life. I do not remember different stores having different bonuses. I'd say the worst pre-order bonus was the one from GameStop, as all it does is start you at level 5 in multiplayer, while the other ones give you an exclusive skin or the air fuel grenade in single player.
For your orders. I'm here to help you sort out which bonuses are the best. First up, GameStop. If you pre-order from them, you'll receive an authentic replica of protagonist Joseph Capelli's Chimeran teeth necklace. Plus, you'll get a multiplayer booster code that allows you to jump in right at level 5. I think that's a pretty sweet deal. Next up is Best Buy. Over at the BB, you'll have the ability to use a final hours of Lieutenant Nathan Hale skin in multiplayer, as you see here. On to Amazon, the online retailer will give you access to the number 60 air fuel grenade that sticks to stuff and sets it on fire. Super sweet! The weapon makes a return from previous games, but you can only use it in the single-player campaign. Well, that's kind of a bummer. Last is Walmart, and the Supergiant is giving you 5 different custom name titles for use in online play, including the obscure Sentinel. Resistance fans, you guys know what that is, right? Right. There will also be a Black Ops Troop skin available from other select stores, but after looking at these options, which would you pick? I'm thinking GameStop and Amazon are looking pretty good.
But finally, in September of 2011, Insomniac would release Resistance 3. Once again, Resistance 3 takes off where its previous title left off, and as I stated earlier, the game took a more grounded and survival approach to the story this time, instead of the high-octane action of Resistance 2. In 1953, shortly after Nathan Hale's death at the hands of Joseph Capelli, Hale's body was recovered by SRPA, in which Dr. Fyodor Malikov discovered a cure from Hale's blood, which he then isolated and created a vaccine to the Chimeran virus. Capelli is dishonorably discharged from SRPA for Hale's death, despite having done it due to Hale having turned into a chimera. 4 years later, Capelli married Susan Farley, the adoptive sister of Nathan Hale, and now lives in a community of survivors in Haven, Oklahoma. By this time, the Chimera had conquered Earth and roughly 90% of humanity had been killed or converted. Those left had resorted to hiding under the ruins, trying to survive in a bleak world dominated by the Chimera, who are intent to wipe out the last remnants of the human race. Despite their efforts, Haven's community is discovered by a Chimeran death squad. Capelli leads the town's fighters against the Chimera until they have summoned a terraformer, a massive terraforming platform to destroy the town. While the townspeople prepare to evacuate, Capelli is reunited with Dr. Malikov, who has spent the last few months trying to find Capelli for help to stop the Chimera from finishing their goal and wiping out humanity. Malikov explains that when Daedalus's flagship was destroyed by the fission bomb, the bomb's explosive energy served as a catalyst to the Chimeran tower network to open a wormhole over New York City, as part of their plan to permanently freeze the planet and render it uninhabitable for humanity. Capelli refuses to help him, but his wife begs him to reconsider, as their son Jack is too weak to survive such a harsh environment. Capelli and Malikov start their journey on a trawler and make their way through the Mississippi River. 2 days later, due to the thickening fog, they lose their way and cut through the flooded town of Wrightsburg, where they end up fighting off hordes of feral chimera and military chimera patrols until their boat is destroyed by a Goliath. The men survive the attack and wash up in St. Louis. With Malikov too injured to continue, Capelli enters the city and encounters a resistance group, the Remnants. In exchange for their help to fix their VTOL and providing medicine to Malikov, the Remnants' leader, Charlie Tent, agrees to help take them to New York. However, they are ambushed by Chimeran fighters near Mount Pleasant, Pennsylvania, forcing Capelli and Malikov to ditch the Remnants. After evading and fighting through Chimeran patrols, they reach an abandoned coal mining town occupied by survivors led by Jean Rose. Capelli helps Jean in fighting her husband and the town's priest, Jonathan, who had went missing several days ago while hunting Satan, a large Chimeran creature who inhabits the nearby mines. Capelli tracks down Jonathan, and they manage to kill Satan. Out of gratitude, the Roses repair an old coal train and allow them to resume their journey. While en route, Malikov reveals to Capelli that after the wormhole was formed, SRPA launched a desperate attempt to destroy the New York Tower that ended in failure. Furthermore, Malikov sadly admits to Capelli that he will likely never see his family again, meaning the entire journey is essentially a suicide mission. But Capelli knew that already, stating that they are doing their best to do this so far. Their journey is soon interrupted by a pack of survivalists, the Wardens, who assault the train. Although Capelli fights off the Wardens, the train is soon derailed by a herd of Widowmakers. Trapped under the train wreckage, Capelli helplessly watches Malikov being beheaded by the Warden leader, Mick Cutler. Capelli is then taken to the Warden's hideout, Greater Ford Prison, where he is forced to fight in a gladiator ring against Grimm's and other Wardens. He is soon freed by Mick's lackey, Herbert Sawicki, a talented engineer who is responsible for maintaining the prison's defenses. Herbert tasks Capelli with disabling the prison's defenses, which is created from modified Chimeran drones that prevents the prison from being targeted by the Chimera, so he can stage a breakout. The plan succeeds and the Chimera attacks the prison. While disabling the last drone, Capelli is attacked by Mick, but after a brutal fistfight, Capelli kills him and escapes the prison with Herbert and the other prisoners as the Chimera lay waste to the prison. Now on his own, Capelli finally reaches New York, which is almost completely consumed in snow and ice. He finds a working radio in an abandoned building and makes a farewell broadcast to his wife, saying that Malakoff is dead and without him, any chance of shutting down the tower is gone. Despite this, Capelli is resolved to try anyway. After fighting through New York and getting close to the tower, he is cornered and overwhelmed by a massive Chimeran force. But at the last second, he is saved and extracted by Charlie and Ellis Turner and their VTOL. Charlie offers to take him back home, but Capelli persuades them to help him destroy the tower by hijacking a terraformer and make it crash into it. The two of them disable the platform's controls and sabotage its power core, thereby maneuvering it to collide with the tower. With the tower destroyed, the wormhole is sealed and Earth's temperatures are reverted to normal. Capelli is soon reunited with Susan and Jack. Meanwhile, numerous resistance groups from all over the planet are reporting that the Chimera are in complete disarray. Eventually, human forces were able to exterminate the Chimera and rebuild their world. The gameplay is something that Insomniac took to heart when it came to the criticism they received for Resistance 2. As stated earlier, they wanted to revert some of the changes that fans didn't like from R2. One of the most important changes from R2 to R3 is the return of the weapon wheel. Additionally, the health system from Fallen Man makes a return as well, once again making your depleted health bars only be able to be fully healed with Simbacks. Additionally, co-op story mode would make a return in replacement of the 8-player co-op from R2. The 2-player co-op features a second playable protagonist, John Harper. Though Harper's presence changes some scripted dialogues in the story, he is not featured in the cinematic cutscenes. Also, player durability has been increased. It is much higher than the previous titles. Additionally, the controls have been tweaked to be more in sync with modern FPSs, like L3 to sprint and R3 to melee. And finally, there were no drivable vehicles in R3. Resistance 3 saw a mixture of old and new weapons alike, all of which are upgradable and become more powerful the more they're used. In total, there are 12 weapons, 6 new and 6 returning weapons. The new weapons are the Mutator, Sledgehammer, Deadeye, Atomizer, Cryogun, and Wildfire, whereas the returning weapons are the Bullseye, Marksman, Magnum, Auger, Rossmore, and Carbine. The Shrapnel Grenade and Molotov serve as replacements for the Fragmentation Grenade and Air Fuel Grenade respectively, and the new EMP Grenade deactivates Chimeran energy shields and drones. The Mutator is an improvised weapon and the 12th and final weapon obtained in Resistance 3. The Mutator fires a weaponized strain of the Chimeran virus extracted from feral leeches in the Gratterford prison. The Mutator's primary fire shoots a glob, causing bulbous cysts to appear on the enemy and mutating the enemy into a combustible landmine. Charging the Mutator causes faster infection of the victim. The secondary fire unleashes a diseased mist that disorients and infects large groups of enemies caught inside. The Sledgehammer is, as the name implies, a sledgehammer. Yep, just a regular sledgehammer against aliens. Deadeye is a Chimeran sniper rifle. Its primary fire is a single supersonic blast of energy with pinpoint accuracy. Its secondary fire is a proton charge that disintegrates most enemies with a single shot, but it is hard to shoot. The charged shot must be charged up and targeted on the target, while if aimed correctly, it's even capable of penetrating through multiple targets. The Atomizer is an electricity-based Chimeran riot weapon. The Atomizer's primary fire shoots out short-range electric bolts that auto-target and disintegrate nearby enemies. Its alternate fire launches a localized gravity well that damages and pulls nearby enemies and their bodies into the well. The Cryogun is a Chimeran weapon. While a rare weapon, the Cryogun uses liquid nitrogen to freeze enemies and force them to a standstill. The Cryogun's primary fire shoots a stream of coolant which arcs with distance. Enemies hit will gradually slow down and eventually freeze, with the amount of fire needed to freeze an enemy directly linked to its health. Frozen enemies remain totally immobile for several seconds, during which time most attacks will shatter the enemy and kill it instantly. This includes melee attacks. The secondary fire is a medium-range shockwave with an arc of about 45 degrees in a straight line, which ignores most obstructions and will knock down weak enemies, though it deals little or no damage. The main function of this attack is to shatter frozen enemies. Finally, the Wildfire is a Chimeran shoulder-mounted, energy-based rocket launcher. The Wildfire holds 2 rockets per clip and another 2 in reserve, and is able to lock onto enemies and vehicles. The secondary fire consists of a slow-moving round that breaks up into multiple cluster rockets before hitting the target, which is similar to the Resistance 2 Lark's secondary fire, with the exception of its artillery-like trajectory, rather than the Lark's shotgun-like spread. Resistance 3 would feature 9 new enemies, a bit smaller than Resistance 2's 19 new enemies, but this was the third game in the franchise, not a reboot, so I wouldn't expect them to make another nearly 20 new enemies again, as that just seems like excessive bloat of enemy variety. Starting off, we have the Brawler. It has a hulking appearance and its movements are almost similar to a gorilla's, and are heavily armored. They're designed to serve as both anti-infantry and anti-armor. The Brawlers are similar to the Titan strain, but much faster and deadlier. Brawlers do not wield any weapons, but instead rely on its brute force and cybernetic gauntlets that fire a barrage of air fuel grenades. Drone beacons are modified Chimeran drones captured by the Wardens. They were used by the Wardens to keep the Chimera from finding Graterford Prison by broadcasting an all-clear signal to nearby Chimeran patrols, thereby keeping them away from the prison. Feral Chimera are independent from the hive mind and hostile against both militarized strains and humans. This led to military Chimera conducting extermination campaigns on feral nests. Longlegs are mechanically augmented hybrids, with powerful mechanical limbs grafted to their elongated legs, which allows them to leap over 100 meters into the air. They use their increased mobility to traverse complex environments and find an ideal firing position to rain down gunfire on their targets. They are capable of pouncing on unsuspecting humans with lethal force. Longlegs also possess superior vision, which allows them to track prey over long distances. Military Chimera refers to Chimera that still remain a part of the Chimeran hierarchy and differentiate from feral Chimera that have evolved independently from the Chimeran hive mind. Due to the dwindling numbers of humans in 1957, military Chimera usually stay in their bases. However, Chimeran death squads are forced to eliminate any nearby human presence or feral chimera. Satan is the name given to an enormous feral chimera by the religious inhabitants of Mount Pleasant. A creature is composed of a large head and 4 retractable claws on the end of long tentacles, one on each corner of its face. It is described in the enemy journal entries image as a unique mutation with an incredibly tough, carbonized exoskeleton that is somehow made from compressed coal molecules. In combat, Satan usually reveals its head and hardly reveals its body, and the only known weakness in its otherwise impenetrable body is in its eyes. It also secretes saliva that has the effect of mutating Grims in the same manner as the mutator does. Shield drones act as support units for Chimeran infantry, in which they project an invincible energy shield that surrounds a chimera, although they seem to only support hybrids, ravagers, and steelheads. However, shield drones are not shielded and can be destroyed in order to break the chimera's shield. Outside of combat, shield drones will alert nearby chimera to the presence of hostile forces upon detection. Shock drones. They emit an arc of electricity as their main weapon, and normally attack in swarms. Finally, we have the Wardens. They are a group of hostile survivalists and former convicts who band themselves together following the United States downfall to the Chimera. The Wardens are ruthless, very violent men who prey on human survivors outside of their prison. The Wardens also have a makeshift arena in Graterford Prison where they sentence their victims to fight against captured feral chimera, or even the Wardens themselves for entertainment. Given the small quantity of food they have found during their raids, and the presence of human remains in the prison's kitchen, suggests that the Wardens may have resorted to cannibalism to survive. Surprisingly, Insomniac dwindled down the player count for Resistance 3's multiplayer, and instead of 40 or 60 players, it would shrink down to 16 in total. Certainly a questionable decision for many fans of the multiplayer. Nevertheless, multiplayer features 12 maps that are set in locations around the world in 5 game modes: Team Deathmatch, War Games, Capture the Flag, Breach, and Chain Reaction. There were 60 ranks in total, with the addition of 9 remnant ranks to achieve. Much like the previous titles, you unlocked skins, guns, titles, and more as you leveled up. While it's subjective to say whether or not someone enjoyed Resistance 3's multiplayer, some of the complaints for it, of course, came from the scaled down size of battles, and the removal of 8-player co-op. But on the positive side, Resistance 3 had more polished gameplay, so if you've played Resistance 3, let me know what you thought of its multiplayer. To many, Resistance 3 would be one of, if not the best title in the whole series. Critics overwhelmingly praised it as well as fans. Compared to Resistance 2, Resistance 3 would have the better score across the board when it came to reviews. On top of this, many fans loved the fact that Insomniac actually listened to what they wanted and brought back fan-favorite features like the weapon wheel. So if it was well received by critics and fans alike, what actually happened? Was it the multiplayer, or lack of 8-player co-op? Not really. Let's take a look at the numbers. Resistance 3 sales flopped. Bad. Within the first month, it only sold around 180,000 copies. This was a sharp decrease compared to Resistance 2's launch. Meanwhile, total sales suggest around 1.79 million copies sold worldwide, which is lower than both previous titles. This would unfortunately deem the game a sales marketing disaster, especially considering its disappointing first month of sales, or better yet, the lack of sales. So financially, Resistance 3 was a failure, but that's not the entire reason it failed. There are a few additional reasons. First, 2011 was a pretty freaking good year to be a gamer, especially if you were a shooter fan. We had Modern Warfare 3, Battlefield 3, Space Marine, Crysis 2, Gears of War, Deus Ex Human Revolution, Saints Row 3rd, Killzone 3, and finally there at the end, Resistance 3. Now let's be honest, if you had the option to play Resistance 3 versus any of these other games, are you still picking Resistance? I mean, personally, I'm going with Battlefield 3, Gears of War 3, and Killzone 3. And that's how most gamers felt at the time. Resistance 3 just wasn't able to stand out enough compared to those other shooter titles and ultimately failed. Next, the console war. If you're old enough to remember that anyways. PlayStation fanboys versus Microsoft fanboys was a very serious time for gamers, but at the time, Sony trailed behind Microsoft in console sales. This was the era of the Xbox, and PlayStation was not the go-to console at the time. Plus, Resistance being a console exclusive limited the game even more, so anyone on Xbox who might have tried it can't simply because of console exclusiveness. Now, this next bit of information is interesting. I'm sure many of you know the infamous, no, not the game, the infamous series known as The Last of Us. Well, according to industry insiders like Colin Moritari, Sony execs weren't too keen on having multiple post-apocalyptic games in their lineup. So when Insomniac pitched the idea for Resistance 4, they were allegedly told Sony didn't want two flagship franchises with similar themes competing with each other, which forced Sony to make a choice. Continue the pre-established franchise that just released a financial failure, or go with the new IP from Naughty Dog, a superstar studio that continuously has shown out IP-wise. From a business standpoint, it's simple. They went all in on Naughty Dog, and as we know, it did pay off. But the final nail in the coffin would come from Insomniac themselves, something we will see much of in this video essay series. The developers were ready to move on. Of course, Sony's decision played a keen part in this idea. It left the Insomniac team feeling the need to create something new, and in 2012, Ted Price confirmed that Insomniac wouldn't be making any more Resistance games, but later said in 2013 that the studio seriously considered a fourth entry. However, Insomniac during that time chose to create the third-person co-op shooter game Fuse instead in order to avoid franchise fatigue. This combination of factors ultimately culminated in the death of mainline Resistance games, but it wouldn't be the end of the IP, at least not yet. Resistance Burning Skies, released in 2012 and developed by Nihilistic Software and published by Sony for the PlayStation Vita, is arguably the weakest and worst entry in the franchise. It has a mixed reception at best when it comes to reviews. Most scores are either average or below average, making the game a very disappointing note to end the series on. Like Retribution, Burning Skies would also feature 8-player online multiplayer with 6 maps, but only 3 game modes this time around. Burning Skies is said to offer console quality experience on the go, and as such, the game retains the weapon wheel from previous titles and an arsenal of 8 guns, a fire axe, and 2 types of grenades. The weapon's secondary fire mode are controlled by the Vita's touchscreen, such as swiping the touchscreen diagonally to load a Molotov onto the mule, drag and throw grenades, and swinging the fire axe. Weapons can be upgraded by Greytech. Similar to the weapon wheel, another wheel is included for upgradable abilities, 6 per weapon. Only 2 upgrades can be equipped at once. Double tapping the Vita's rear touchpad activates sprint mode. Originally, Burning Skies was going to utilize the Vita's 6-axis controls to peek over cover. However, this feature was not added into the final game. Additionally, after completing the story, a New Game Plus option is unlocked in which the player retain all their weapons when starting a new playthrough. Hidden pieces of intel are also scattered throughout the campaigns for the player to find. The story begins with Tom Riley along with Engine 174 driving through Staten Island. They arrive at a power station that is inflamed. They enter the station, and Tom is separated from his fellow firemen after accidentally falling into the lower levels of the station through a broken floor. As Tom works his way back up, he sees one of the firemen being attacked and killed by Longlegs. Tom is forced to fight his way out of the station and rescue one of his fellow firemen. Once outside, Tom learns that the Chimeran invasion is in full swing. Riley then makes his way through the city, eventually picking up a broadcast asking him to assist with the evacuation. Tom follows the directions given by the broadcast, eventually meeting up with a woman named Ellie Martinez, the leader of the self-titled Minutemen. With the support of Ellie and her ally Mac, Tom fights his way to a highway bridge where Tom reunites with his wife Natalie and daughter Rachel. Tom sends his family to safety, promising to find them. As more Chimera show up, Riley is forced to stay behind with Ellie to buy the survivors some time. Along the way, Tom and Ellie come across a mysterious shipment in a military truck called Greytech, which demonstrates the capabilities of upgrading their weapons. It is revealed that the shipment was being sent to Richard Gorel. They are again attacked by Chimeran ground forces, but Tom and Ellie defeat them. Before they could leave the highway, however, an executioner attacks them. Tom and Ellie are able to destroy the executioner and escape from bombardment of spires and crawlers. They make their way to a military base in Bayonne, New Jersey, where Ellie introduces Tom to her ally, Colonel George Amherst, who notifies Tom that his family has been sent to a protection camp in Union City. Immediately after, the Chimera ambush the base. Riley assists in fending off the attack, which includes saving a wounded soldier and killing a gargantuan Chimera creature called the Abomination. As Tom and Ellie progress towards Ellis Island, they sight some Chimeran reinforcements traveling along the George Washington Bridge. Ellie calls in an airstrike in an effort to eliminate the reinforcements. Unfortunately, a VTOL crashes on the bridge, but it is too late to call the airstrike off. Tom drops onto the bridge and begins to make his way to the crashed VTOL's crew. After searching the destroyed VTOL, Tom discovers an injured soldier trapped inside the VTOL. Tom rescues him and reunites with Ellie. Tom and Ellie then make their way to the end of the bridge, encountering Grims along the way. They eventually reach the exit, only to find that it has been sealed off by the government. As Ellie attempts to find an escape route, Tom faces off against an impaler. Tom and Ellie jump down an emergency exit just as another airstrike hits the bridge. Tom and Ellie eventually regroup with Mac, who helps them reach Ellis Island. Tom and Ellie are ambushed by some Chimera. After clearing out all the hostiles, they eventually reach the laboratories where they reach a sealed vault door. A man contacts them asking for help. Tom and Ellie begin to fight their way to the man, only to learn that he has been infected. Once Tom kills the man, he proceeds towards Richard Gorel's office. Tom and Ellie find a projector, which plays an instructional video. They learn that Gorel is working on Project Phoenix, and was kidnapping several humans for testing, including Rachel and Natalie. Tom and Ellie ride a VTOL to a protection camp in Union City, in hopes of rescuing Tom's family. Once at the camp, Tom and Ellie split up. Riley fights his way to a crashed VTOL, discovering an injured pilot. Once the pilot is saved, Tom sets out to regroup with Ellie. He fights his way through Chimeran-infested mines and buildings, eventually learning the location of Natalie and Rachel. Tom catches a quick glimpse of a Chimeran carrier taking his family to a nearby conversion tower. Riley and Ellie board a floating Chimera in an effort to follow Natalie and Rachel. Tom and Ellie finally reach the conversion tower. They are separated when Ellie decides to search for Gorel, while Tom looks for his family. After clearing out several groups of Chimera, Tom eventually finds an infected Natalie. Tom performs a mercy kill on her, shooting her with his carbine. Tom eventually regroups with Rachel and Ellie. The latter proceed to help evacuate some survivors while Tom hunts down Gorel. Once Tom finds him, Gorel convinces Tom to trust him as he awakens an unfinished Leviathan in an effort to show Tom his potential power over the Chimera. However, Gorel fails to control the beast and immediately flees. Once Tom escapes, he is contacted by Ellie, who informs him that some other Minutemen have arrived. Tom confronts the Leviathan, eventually killing it. While making his way to the tower's exit, he is ambushed by Gorel. Tom uses his fire axe to finish Gorel off. Tom reunites with Ellie, warning her about the disparate government and how they allowed Gorel to proceed with Project Phoenix. After ditching all his Greytech, Tom parts ways with Ellie as he and Rachel walk off. Burning Skies, simply put, was a train wreck. The game was ripped apart from the story all the way to the AI. While Insomniac entries were dripping with atmosphere and stellar gameplay, Burning Skies received buzzwords like formulaic and mindless. From Reddit posts on Burning Skies, it seems like most fans consider it to be the absolute worst out of all the Resistance games. Not only this, but as I mentioned, it contained even less multiplayer content than Retribution, something that seems odd considering Burning Skies was on a newer handheld system. It was a complete misfire at keeping the franchise afloat. Instead of being a system seller that the Vita desperately needed, it was yet another example of the handheld's struggles to maintain any good IPs on the system. But for the Resistance franchise itself, this would officially be the final game made. As far as sales numbers go for this, once again, VG Charts states that this game only sold a pitiful 0.44 million copies globally, even less sales than Retribution. Oh, I almost forgot. Outside of the video games and web series, there are 2 books. The first book is titled Resistance: The Gathering Storm, published on April 29th of 2009. And the follow-up book, Resistance: A Hole in the Sky, was published on August 2nd of 2011. Both of these books were written by William C. Dietz and do follow the events of the games. The first book, The Gathering Storm, takes place 4 months after the events of Fall of Man, and follows Nathan Hale and his original mission with the SRPA shortly after his departure from Britain in a presidential conspiracy during the height of the Chimeran War. The second book, A Hole in the Sky, serves as a prequel to Resistance 3 and takes place shortly after Hale's death at the end of 2. The story follows Joseph Capelli, Susan Farley, and the remnants of the United States government from July 1953 to January 1954. In addition to these 2 novels, there was also a comic for the games, simply titled Resistance. The comic was published in 2009 with a total of 7 issues. The first issue, number 0, was available in the collector's edition of Resistance 2, and on February 3rd, 2010, all 7 issues would be available in a single volume. Plot of the comics is as follows. The Chimera have conquered Europe and turned their attention to North America. The US government has lost contact with Fort Anchorage, the largest American military base in the world, and the safest place for Robert Oppenheimer to conduct his experiments. Now clandestine units serving under Sergeant Capelli must infiltrate the base and secure Oppenheimer, but can anyone stop the Chimera from getting their hands on the first atomic bomb? By the way, shout out to this person right here for making me aware of this media. So, what happened to Resistance? With the disappointing handheld release and low sales figures for the console title, Resistance would ultimately die as a franchise, and the official end would come on April 8th of 2014. Sony would shut down multiplayer servers for the entire PlayStation 3 trilogy. The bustling battlefields of 40 to 60 players would finally be silenced. And that's where the official story ends, but in online forums and comment sections there will always be talk and rumors of Resistance 4, which would be great if it was more than just the fans talking about it. As stated earlier, Ted Price has mentioned in interviews that there was a pitch to Sony for Resistance 4 to keep exploring that universe, but it was sadly shot down in favor of other games. The market was also oversaturated at this point. Other franchises were able to have much more success than that of Resistance and became the mainstay giants that we know today. The legacy of Resistance is generally positive. All 3 of the console titles are typically well received from not only critics but fans as well, even with Resistance 2 removing the weapon wheel. The handheld games tell another story, with one being well received and the other one being a disaster on almost every metric possible. To make things worse for Resistance, you can only access them now by either buying a PlayStation 3 and the respective discs, which can be a pain to come by, especially a PlayStation 3 in good condition, unless you already own the console and the discs of course, or from cloud streaming on PlayStation Plus, which isn't ideal, or perhaps an emulator. There are no remasters, remakes, collections, or talks of revival. This multi-million selling franchise from one of Sony's most important studios has almost been entirely left behind. The death of Resistance wasn't a murder of the franchise. It was just a pragmatic decision made by executives backed up by data and sales figures. Quality doesn't always mean a game's survival. And for the fans of the franchise that have been waiting for something ever since, the silence has been deafening. Wow, okay. That was a lot, and to be honest, a much longer video than I intended originally. Now for those of you who voted in the poll on this channel of what game you want me to cover next, you'll know that Mag had the second highest amount of votes. So yes, Mag will be getting the next What Happened To video. As far as this one goes, if you've managed to make it all the way through this, thank you. Truly, it means a lot to me for people to watch these videos that I make. And if there's anything that I may have missed or you'd like to add, let me know in the comments below, or just talk about your memories with the series. Also, if you're interested in more from me, or just want to hear more of this nerdy voice talk, I do have a second channel that I livestream on, if my schedule grants it, every Wednesday and Saturday night. I also have a Twitch if you want to follow me on there. I've got plenty of party games to play if we get enough viewers at some point. Anyways, that's all I've got for now. I hope you have a good morning, good afternoon, or a good night.